Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. We love you in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe, but there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July the 7th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, I feel a little bit like Mr. Rock. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. The weather's just gorgeous here this afternoon, and I want to say thank you once again to all the frontline healthcare workers for the marvelous job that they do in trying to keep America safe throughout this pandemic. The frontline workers, the nurses, doctors, and first responders.
We want to make sure they get their props, Big C. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. Also, anywhere in the world, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV or you'll be sitting there looking at a still pictures all fair and love and war. Big C. Man, I love doing the pause. Pausing is like when I go for a run. After I run for about 1 minute, I got to stop and take the pause, Big C. But I'll never pause on the Veterans Crisis Hotline. They are really experienced at helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, it is even more important now as we think about the bounty that the Russian government put out on our American soldiers fighting in wars overseas, Charlton, and our president has done nothing about it. If he did nothing to protect American lives in the field, you know he's not going to do anything to protect American lives when they come back home. And many of these soldiers, Charlton, have suffered from mental as well as physical ailments after returning from war. And we lose some 22 a day to suicide in this country, a horrific number, Charlton. And the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is something that we give out dearly every show that we do, trying to help stem that tide of suicide that's going on in America. I know we need a lot more as a company, as a country, and as a government. But all we can do is give out this number, Charlton, and hopefully other Americans would adhere to that also.
They can do that, too. We're going to work on your microphone, Big C, but it's 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And you can get them some help. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants, and the Say Hey Kid. Just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV, just like banks are doing. McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, and sports teams. They're trying to do it again, too. It's all fair and love and war. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. For those of you looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can see some opportunities also. Man, there's a lot of things going on in the world of sports. And I know everybody's still buzzing over, I think it was $500+ million that Patrick Mahomes, or you call him Patrick Mahomes, got. But it's not like he got it all in one day, Big C. He still has to wait for that money. He hasn't ink dried on the dotted line yet, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, this was a maneuver, I think, that was put together by the entire NFL governing body, Charlton. When you think about all the owners coming to an understanding of the rising cost of quarterbacks in today's era of the NFL. You had to stop the spike someplace, Charlton, and this is what the owners did. I think everyone in ownership colluded with the Hunt on this, that we have to stop the rising of quarterbacks saying that I'm worth this and I'm worth that.
Yeah.
If you set the table with the best quarterback in the NFL, we're going to give Mr. Mahomes $500 million to play football.
A lot of money.
But that stretches out over a decade when you look at the length of the contract. It is a decade-long contract, actually 12 years, because he has 2 years left on his rookie deal. So what the owners and the Hunts did, Charlton, would say, okay, this is the standard. This young man has won the league MVP.
Yeah.
He has won a Super Bowl MVP. He has won a Super Bowl trophy. So all of you guys who come in up and down the line saying that this is what you want, this is how much you're going to have, this is where the standard is. Show me what you have done beyond what Patrick Mahomes has done. So I think that this was a league-wide collusion deal when Patrick Mahomes got this deal done. There's a lot of people crying, talking about, well, he left a lot of money on the table. Damn, if you think about with $500 million on the decade, he doesn't need to be living.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. So I look at this as a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to put the brakes on how much money players can make in a league. Unless you're going to form your own league, owners are in business to stay in business and make a profit.
Yeah.
You're not going to give all the profit to your employees.
Yeah.
And that's what the NFL has just said. So by Patrick Mahomes getting this amount of money, it's great, because as we look at the news cycles over the past month in America, whether we're talking about sports, whether we're talking about politics, whether we're talking about everyday American life, the Negroes are controlling the mainstream of the narrative in the media.
Yeah, and also it does make a lot of guys, they put that carrot, they said that you got to wave the carrot with the stick. It gets more people thinking, man, maybe I don't want to sit out COVID-19 football season. Maybe if I at least show up, I can get my contract renewed too. But I know everybody has their own thoughts about that. But I want to, before I get back into some football, I think Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, I believe that POTUS was saying that school must start. It's not a matter of when, but how it will start. Are they going to really try to force kids to go to school when even the schools are being, and the governors are saying it's not safe? That make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you look at this national government, Charlton, and they haven't put any safeguards in to protect the children or the administrators in these school and educational systems, Charlton. I look at Harvard today. Harvard said they're going completely online education. You're talking about one of the top educational institutions in America, Harvard. Ivy League school said they're going to go completely online, and they're not going to put the students or the faculty at risk at this prestigious university. But POTUS's whole issue is he's saying, well, if parents are not at home, then they're going to be forced to go back to work. You know, you can say that school starts and parents are going to go back to work, but go back to work where? When the country is in on a lockdown.
Yeah.
But this lets you know the insensitivity of Betsy DeVos as well as Donald Trump about the health and welfare of the citizens of the United States. We know many administrators in the high school and grammar school level, Charlton, are senior citizens, at least 50% of them, Charlton, because they became lifelong educators. And so they dedicated their life to educating the young people of America. And you're saying you're not concerned about their health risk or the health risk of a lot of these students, Charlton, who will go back home to not just parents but grandparents after school and expose them to whatever they've been exposed to.
Yeah, I think even Division I schools continue to report positive tests among students and athletes. There's even some talk of a player that had an outside test and then he had an inside test. He tested positive and negative depending on who did the testing. But D1 schools continue to report that they're having challenges. Imagine trying to send a kid into class when they're still saying they're having problems with COVID-19. I think even Division II schools and Division III, William and Mary, also Morehouse College, and they've decided to cancel fall sports. I don't think any president, I mean, he didn't go to the military. They could just say they had shin splints and not show up to class, Big C, but I don't see any parent trying to say, let's go against doctor's orders. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, and I think the salient parents, first and foremost, Charlton, will understand that I'm not going to put my kids in risk. I know last week in Florida we had a young man, unfortunately, at the age of 11, lost his life to COVID-19. So if they want to say that this is not attacking the youth of America, Charlton, in Florida is one of the hottest states as far as the rise of COVID-19. And I don't know how intelligent the administration is, Charlton. They said the reason why we're getting more positive tests is because we're testing more people. No, you're just testing the people who are positive. They're already positive. They didn't become positive because you took the test. They had COVID-19. You found out that they had COVID-19, and this is what you're doing. You're providing an opportunity to separate and isolate them, Charlton, from the rest of the population to hope stem the tide of that. That's how dumb our administration is.
And well, and another thing too, I know it's probably this way all over the country, but there's something called these mom and pop soccer leagues for the youth soccer leagues, Big C. When you think about youth sports, there's really no centralized authority like Major League Baseball and the NFL and NBA, and all their players are testing positive. There's nothing, no centralized patchwork of authority for the youth in our country, Big C, that has talked about reopening with COVID-19, forcing parents to navigate the smorgasbord of restrictions and recommendations. And then, as they're trying to defund Obamacare, if a lot of parents don't have access to the money that it would take to get them healthy, to get them into hospitals, if you open the high schools, then you're going to have these mom and pop soccer leagues next, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you talk about a regulatory commission, Charlton, for youth sports. You don't even have to look at a state. You can look just at a town. Some towns, Charlton, have dozens of teams that participate in these youth sports. And so now all of a sudden, you're going to bring all these human bodies together, not just the kids, Charlton, but you're talking about the parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts and uncles. Those are the support staff when you talk about youth sports. Those are the ones who are attending the games.
Yeah.
And so now you want to put everybody in a petri dish, and you're not going to test these kids, Charlton, before or after games. They're not going to have the medical care that you would get on the collegiate or professional level, Charlton, where you can have testing every day or every other day.
Yeah.
You just don't have the economics to support that. So you're telling these kids, go out and play at your own peril and become test guinea pigs for it.
Yeah, kamikaze pilots, they would always, before they knew they were going to crash, they tried to land on an aircraft carrier or another ship because they wanted to take everybody out. They called them Japanese Zeros, Big C, those kamikaze pilots. Bottom line, and no matter, this is not about political, it's not about what gender, what your religious beliefs are. Sports has changed. Just like a tsunami changes things, Big C. The sports is never going to be a sense of normalcy, at least for the remainder of this year. We have a global pandemic, and no matter how bad people want to play, it just doesn't make any sense to go against scientific evidence. But I've also found when you think about how the virus has been increasing in states, and POTUS says, well, 99% of the people who are affected, nothing happens to them, Big C, even though 130-plus thousand people have already, unfortunately, met their fate. I just believe, and as my own thoughts, if we are stupid enough to look at the COVID-19 rallies where people are gathering without a mask, and you're going to tell me that you're going to have high school kids and elementary kids, Mrs. Betsy DeVos, sit in a classroom with a mask on, 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, however long they go to school? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if people did have any type of anomaly happen, the federal government's not going to come in and pay their medical bills. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's where I differ with you on that part, Charlton. The sports has been politicized. When you think about how sports is being reacted to right now, when you have the Oval Office getting with NFL team owners and NBA team owners saying you got to bring the games back. You got to get those Negroes out there playing again because we need them as a distractor here in the United States to take their mind off of what I'm doing in a negative light. So it has been politicized. But as Betsy DeVos is talking about putting kids in a classroom with poor circulation for 7 to 8 hours a day, Charlton, and telling them to breathe that recycled air. And we're talking about going into a situation where we're going to have the fall coming up soon, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so there's not going to be any extra ventilation in those classrooms. And so that air is going to be constantly recirculated with the heating system that's on in there, Charlton. So you're talking about putting people in peril. Here it is. You won't wear a mask, but you say these kids will be totally protected if they stay in the same pathogen environment all day long with the air blowing around in that room, Charlton, blowing at each other. And you can't practice social distancing. We know that classrooms are overcrowded now.
Yeah.
That there's in excess of 30 children to every classroom. You don't have any extra rooms to put these children in, Charlton. So how do you practice social distancing when they're only 3 feet apart from each other?
Yeah, you can't. And when you force kids to go to school, most of the students in the United States are Caucasian, at least for now. That's going to be the trend for the next 20 years. But even as a side note, I know we love sports. We love everything that we're able to do. But the summer, when you think about it, a summer of evictions, it may loom in America, Big C, if the Senate does not extend another stimulus, and that will affect a lot of African Americans as well as Latino Americans as much as any other group. I know Patrick Mahomes got the $500 million, but he's not paying for these kids to go to school. There has to be something also to keep people in their home. If not, how are you going to focus on class when you have no place to live, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, see, these are the things that Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump did not address. If you don't extend a new stimulus package, you're not going to have the wherewithal and the finances to stay in your dwelling, Charlton. So if you don't have a place to stay, going to school is the last thing on anybody's mind if you don't have a roof over your head and some food to put in your belly. So as we think about the plight of Negro Americans and Hispanic Americans, Charlton, they were so hardly hit by this pandemic, and those are the number one people in the workforce. 46% of the workforce, Charlton, were minority people, Charlton, that lost their jobs in this pandemic.
Yeah.
And now if you don't have a job to go back to, because when you think about it, majority of them are in the service industry.
Yeah.
The service industry is going to be the last to come back from this pandemic, Charlton, because it's non-essential when you look at it and putting people in peril.
Yeah.
But Betsy DeVos is saying, well, if your kids can go back to school, at least we can say that, we got a part of the economy going again. No, because you want to put these kids out there as guinea pigs.
Yeah, those teachers' unions, they get paid when they have what they call butts in the seats, Big C. The more butts in the seats, the more they get paid. But again, I know people are all talking about, I can't believe Patrick Mahomes got $500 million. But nearly 4 out of 10 Black and Hispanic homes with children are struggling to feed their families during COVID-19. A dramatic spike that exacerbates the racial inequalities in the United States and potentially even threatening the health and welfare of millions of young Americans. And that's not being addressed as much as trying to send people back to school. They can school online. You can use some of that money to send in computers to their homes. And also you can fund a food program that can show up at the place of residence, if that makes sense, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's what they've done during the summertime. They had the meals where parents could go by the school and pick up lunches and breakfasts for their children because school did not finish out the school year in this area here. So that was one of the programs that they had. They had the outreach program to feed the kids because so many of those children rely on their breakfast and lunch that they would get at school, Charlton. That would be the two staple meals that they would get during the day.
Yeah.
And this is something that the president and the administration do not want to provide. They don't want to care about the nutrition of the underprivileged children in America, Charlton. They're saying that everybody's well off like we are. They're all millionaires also, so they shouldn't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. But that's the insensitivity of the White House. And people will say, just as you said, Patrick Mahomes getting $500 million. That's an individual in a business, in a profession that has allowed him to get that money, Charlton. Everybody in football doesn't get that type of money.
No.
That money was put out there as a benchmark to slow the tide of other quarterbacks coming along that's going to be negotiating for big money contracts over the next couple of years, is that they have a benchmark to tell people you cannot exceed what Patrick Mahomes is getting because you have not exceeded what he has done success-wise.
Yeah, and with 4% of the world's population, the United States is 4% of the world's population, yet the United States has about 25% of the positive COVID-19 cases. But giving one African-American $500 million kind of says, people say, well, is that reparation for everybody or just for Patrick Mahomes? But it does take the mind off of how many people have been struggling just to put food on the table. And we really need that to be addressed. The $500 million, that's his Marshall Plan, but it doesn't affect a lot of other people, Big C. I want to follow up on something that you had talked about yesterday, where you were saying that African Americans could have their own league and how, because there used to be Negro League Baseball before integration, the Branch Rickey, project to take money out of the Negro leagues and have people follow Major League Baseball. So, history does repeat itself at times. So what you said is not far-fetched because it's already happened, even though it might be it would have to take a lot of people trying to get on that same page legally and also understanding how they have to have power, and you got to be willing to have power and not be willing to acquiesce your power to other people. That makes sense, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, getting on the same page is not difficult. You just have to have someone come up with a plan to show them the salientness of having your own business that you control all aspects of it, Charlton. We know the money that comes out there from the television revenue. You think about the Kansas City Chiefs giving Patrick Mahomes $500 million over a decade. That's a lot of money. but that means that they have enough money that does not bother them. That's
Yep.
just one individual they're giving $500 million.
Yeah.
You know, it would be nice to see Negro athletes come to some sensibility to say, we can make this happen. At least let's explore it. Let's put together a commission to study it, as every other company does. Let's put together a feasibility study in what it would take to form our own league. When you think about the NBA and the NFL and the number of population of Negro athletes in both of those leagues, Charlton,
Yeah.
what they would be able to do as a conglomerate to put these leagues together. There are enough intelligent black men and women around this country, Charlton, to run the league for them, to put them in place. Lawyers, accountants, all of these negotiators that they could get there and work there for them. So this is something that they really need to take a stern look at. When we look at things changing in America and how things change and how things can't always stay the same,
Yeah.
the empowerment of a people, Charlton, is what you need to look at in America now. And people will say, well, why can't you people just be happy the way things are? That's the same
Yeah.
goddamn thing they said during slavery.
Yeah.
Why can't you just be happy? You're getting a meal, you're getting beat every week. You should be okay with that. So,
Yeah.
this is that opportunity, once again, that salient moment in America where black athletes have gathered enough finances, Charlton, where they can start to potentially produce their own.
Yeah, we're going to have to bleep one of your words, Big C. But at the same time, I want to make sure that when Vince McMahon started the XFL, I think his net worth is just about $2 billion. But he started the XFL, and I know when the COVID-19 came on the scene, it knocked everything off the schedule. So the XFL. But when Vince McMahon started the XFL, he didn't do it with what they call A-rated players. That was a lot of guys that were not going to get on an NFL roster anyway. Some guys were pulled up. But when Vince McMahon founded the XFL with backup players and was somewhat successful, imagine if collectively African-American players did follow his plan and control the TV and corporate contracts that the owners are now getting now. They would not need to beg for the Rooney Rule. They would have people to say, look, we have the power. We're going to do the same thing that Vince McMahon did and start a league. Now, when McMahon did it, they said, what a brilliant businessman. But and as he brought along together a lot of his white businessmen also. But if black men did that, don't worry about the pushback. There's always pushback, Big C. But it has been done even within the last year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, has been done on multiple occasions. When you can go back to the World Football League back in the early 70s, then you had the United States Football League in the mid-80s, Charlton, and you've had the XFL try a couple of different occasions. And what you did, you took basically leftover football players to do this with.
Yeah.
And you still had a television audience. I think about the USFL, it challenged the NFL for a while because they got signature players, Charlton, to join the USFL. They got former NFL players as well as top-flight collegiate players, and the World Football League did the same also, Charlton.
Yeah.
So there is a desire. But when you turn on the television on Saturday, on Sunday, or any day that the NBA or the NFL is playing, you're turning it on to see what the Negro players are going to be doing at that time, Charlton. That's what, regardless of your culture,
Yeah.
that's what you're turning it on for. You can talk about you want to see Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan and, Drew Brees, but you want to see the players that they're giving the ball to. That's what makes the difference in their lives. Without those players that they're giving the ball to, those guys are non-existent.
Yeah.
Because you have showed that you can pencil in any quarterback in those systems. Look at what Teddy Bridgewater did in New Orleans last year when Drew Brees went down.
Yeah.
He stepped in, didn't miss a beat, won 5 consecutive games. So it shows that the Negro athlete can have their own league and develop it, and it would be the mainstay in the United States. People are going to tune in to watch it because you want to watch great competition.
Yeah.
You think about NASCAR, where the president was blasting NASCAR the past couple of days. When was the last time you saw a NASCAR driver's face during the race? You just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
You see the car, you see his uniform, you see his helmet, but you don't see his face. And the same thing with all sports. But you know where the better competition is.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there and you recognize these players, the branding that the NFL and the NBA has produced over the years, Charlton, the Negro players, Charlton, are the ones that everyone gravitates to. And when you look at the All-Star teams and you look at the championship games, Charlton, they're the ones carrying the mail.
Yeah, it's been done before. I'm glad you brought up how the USFL, they had a lot of players that came that were going to be in the NFL, they went over to the USFL because they offer the money. And there are people that criticize that league. I think that league was finally bankrupt because Donald Trump got involved with it when he owned part of the New Jersey Generals. But for people that say, $500 million, oh my God, I can't believe how much money he get. Well, people in banking understand there's something called factoring. The NFL made about $15 billion in 2019. And that's not all the money. They don't open the books. But the ownership, about $15 billion with a B in 1 year in 2019. African-American players make up about 80% of the league. So that's, even if you say 75 to 80% of the league, that's about $10.5 billion of the $15 billion that was generated by the percentage of African-Americans that make up the league. With factoring in banking, collectively, if you take $1,000 to the bank, they can lend you $10,000 off of that money. If you put $10,000, you can let out $100,000. Collectively, African Americans with $10.5 billion produced of that $15 billion, collectively, Big C, they would hold the power of $105 billion collectively with factoring in banking. That's why ownership has always kept people out of it, unless they were Caucasian, except for Sean Conn. It's not about how much you make. It's about how much more the bank will lend you based on what you make. And African Americans have never had that type of clout when it came to NFL, but they do now if they understand factoring. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they do understand factoring, Charlton. It's just a matter of finding leadership is what it comes down to. Who's going to be the players to go out there and say, we're going to get this done? I think a lot of Negro players look at what happened to Colin Kaepernick and say, well, you know, he spoke against the mainstream and look at what they did. Yeah, but if you have your own league, he would still be allowed to do that and still be playing. You know, everybody wants to be his buddy now.
Yeah.
They wanted to tell the world that Colin Kaepernick was lying 4 years ago. But now everybody's walking around with their tails tucked between their legs and saying, you know, maybe we looked at that wrongly. Maybe these guys actually weren't lying to us.
Yeah.
And so that's what I look at as the main reason why the Negro athletes should start now, while you have momentum and looking to do your own thing. I mean, as I look at everybody, you know, mainstream trying to force these players back out there to play for them to turn a profit. You should look at turning a profit for your life, you know, and put that health risk in your hand, not in somebody else's hand.
Yeah, that's the main thing. When I go to my doctor, I don't care what I see on TV. I told you a guy that I know at work, was on high blood pressure medication. I guess somebody convinced him to stop taking it, and then he ended up having a stroke at 50. And he's still trying to get things back together again. But it's all fair level work. Before we get up to the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout, as we talk about the Rooney Rule, and people saying, well, you don't want to create your own league. Isn't Mouser paying you enough? It's just like not owning your house, convincing somebody to rent doesn't make any sense. But the NFL, black-owned NFL franchise, that never was, it needs also a Me Too movement renaissance, Big C. If you think about, there are people who've tried to start leagues before and buy their own teams before, but it wasn't always given the go-ahead. And we're going to take the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. When we come back, we're going to talk more about people that tried to have their own team in their own league, and they were shut down by the powers that be. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There are other apps in the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. When you think about black-owned NFL franchise that never was, in 1970s, it was Rami Loud, Big C. He believed that he was going to break pro football's racial barriers. He ended up having some things happen to him. At the same time, 1971, a reporter by the name of Pat Horn of the Boston Record American had a big package. It was exclusive, Big C, a headline. It was called "A Black Group, now they called African Americans, petitions the NFL for a franchise." It's called the Memphis Kings. I know they since shot that down, Big C, but it's already been tried in the past. Sammy Davis Jr., Sidney Poitier, they were involved in the group. And it was also a lot of the people that were in the South that understood it, that have money. There was Black-owned enterprise. There was Ebony Magazine. There was Park Sausage, Johnson Products Corporation. There were companies that were trying to do it, and they were even trying to get help from President Richard Nixon, who was an avid football fan, but he said no. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, see, the thing about that, you have to understand, groups cannot own a team in the NFL. The NFL is called solo ownership because there's one person, one representative for a team in the NFL. And this is the reason why you've had failures from the Negro community in trying to obtain an NFL franchise, because they didn't want to give sole power to one individual and everybody else have a board on the side. They all wanted to be represented equally in that partnership, Charlton, and that's not going to happen. This is the way that the NBA and the NFL has operated. They do not believe in partnership. It's sole independent ownership of a franchise. And so this is the reason why you put together a Negro League of football and basketball, Charlton, because then you allow for this to operate. If these people still have that same type of interest in the wherewithal of the format that they laid out back in the 70s, I'm going to believe that template's laying around somewhere still. So right now is a prime time with the unrest that's going on in America for Negroes to make a solid move and create a new foundation of financial wealth and independence in this country, Charlton.
And that would mean that people would have to have a paradigm shift. And for the Caucasian Americans, it doesn't mean you can't ask them for work. They can have a really rule for Caucasian Americans too, but it would require black men to think like white men. I don't know if any, and this pejoratively speaking, but I doubt if Donald Trump's father sent him to business school to go work for a black league, they actually start discriminating against black Americans. But if you think about it, the first black couple who owned New York City's first black-owned sports team in Brooklyn, Big C, they're Brooklyn natives called Corey and Tamara Galloway. They dreamt of owning the professional sports teams in New York City, just like we're talking about now. And the dream came true while making history as owners of the National Arena League's New York Streets. That was a franchise football team, and now he's now part of a small group of African Americans who own their own professional sports team. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, see, that ability is there because we have people who have made inroads on that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of convincing the athletes. I mean, when you see the amount of money that's on the table, when you see Mr. Mahomes gets $500 million to play for each decade, that lets you know that the financial strength is there. And that's the demand for the Negro athlete, is that you make the Negro athlete the highest paid professional ever in team sports. He surpassed what Mike Trout had done 2 years ago when Mike Trout got $427 million.
Yeah.
And people said, wow, how can you pay a guy that much money? Well, when I think about Mr. Mahomes and what he makes per game, a little over $2.8 million a game throughout the duration of this contract, is the value of that contract. So when you think about that type of money and that type of leverage that these players have, this is what you do. You leverage your body against getting something in return. You leverage your contract. This is the value of my contract. This is what it is. When you're going to buy a house, you do the same thing. You got to show what your net worth is and what you're going to have in income over the next couple of years potentially.
Yeah.
And in that contract, he has $141 million of that guaranteed, Charlton. So there's $141 million of that contract that's guaranteed that he's going to get over the next several years.
Yeah.
So as you look at that, Charlton, and this type of money is put forth, when you think about the salary cap of all the teams in the NFL, which is around $170 million a year for a salary cap.
I'll take it.
That's the type of money that these players have.
Yeah.
Just as salary. Not talking about fiduciary money, the rest of the money that's coming through the organization, through broadcasting, through sponsorship, through merchandising and all those things. So when you think about a team owner, Charlton, every year gathering up $1 billion in revenue to $2 billion in revenue that he's going to obtain.
Yeah.
You think about the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Dallas Cowboys make somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $9 million every home game, $60 to $90 million every home game.
Yeah.
That's how much money they make. And so you think about the Kansas City Chiefs in the money that they paid Patrick Mahomes. They make that money in those two playoff games, those two extra games that they had at Arrowhead this past season, Charlton, prior to winning the Super Bowl. I believe their payout on those two games was $48 million.
Yeah.
$48 million in revenue from those two games. So his salary means nothing.
Yeah, the money is in ownership. And ownership, just like Everything else, if you own it, you can gain the appreciation. You go to the bank, they say, what do you own? What do you want a loan for what? What's your collateral? What's your credit collateral? What's your income? I own a professional sports franchise. Oh, okay, well, come on in and sit down, Mr. Jones. They'll have Mr. Jones sit down. But also speaking, the NFL Players Association, Big C, President J.C. Tretter, escalated a disagreement with the NFL over the terms of training camp in the preseason amid the COVID-19 pandemic. In a blog post, he said it's unwilling to prioritize players' safety and believe that the virus will bend to football. It's just like Betsy DeVos and POTUS saying that they're going to send kids to school anyway, and that they're going to say it's not if but when that they want to make it happen by this fall for any parent that's foolish enough to bypass their doctor's opinion and go with what POTUS says. But when the NFL PA, the president of J.C. Tretter, is saying the league is not doing enough, they're flexing some power. But imagine if they came together and said 80% of our athletes decide they're going to go form their own league. You think the NFL would say, hey, let's put it on pause and see if we can work something out, or would they still keep pushing to go over that cliff? Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, they would put it on pause. They would raise the salary cap. All of those things would be renegotiated and put it on the table. I like what J.C. Tretter did in calling out the NFL, saying that they have no set criteria for controlling this COVID-19, no real set ironclad COVID-19 testing, Charlton, that they're using the players as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm such an advocate of the Negroes, Charlton, going out and forming their own league. At least they can take their own health concerns into their heart, Charlton.
Yeah.
They know the history of bad health with Negroes throughout America, and they're going to be a part of that in their family. Not just them, Charlton, but their spouses, their children, their parents, their siblings, all of those people. So the NFL has never has never put out an issue, Charlton, a statement about how they plan on controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. They're just saying we're going to do some testing, we're going to get the players back in. But as we've seen from baseball in the past week, Charlton, that baseball players, some of them has waited over a week and have not gotten their test results back.
Yeah.
You can't do that with football players because they're licking and breathing on each other every play.
Yeah. Well, I hope they're not licking on each other, Big C. I understand they're breathing and maybe sweating, but hopefully they're not licking. But I know some guys have been known to bite other players. So when you think about this, remember it's amazing how time flies. I think it was just the last couple of years, this CTE lawsuit that hit the NFL because players were saying the league did not do enough to keep them safe, and they knew that the CTE was a problem, but they hid it. The same league that was sued and settled for hiding CTE, now they're saying COVID-19 is okay. POTUS says it's okay. He goes to conferences without a mask on. So could you imagine if they allow players to go in and a number of players end up on respirators? It's not about how many lawsuits, it's about when, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you answered your own question, Charlton, when you said they hid the results of CTE. Hid it for a couple of decades, Charlton.
Yeah.
Not a week, not a year. They hid it for a couple of decades because they knew the ravaging factor of concussions, Charlton, on the human body and the toll that it took on the human brain.
Yeah.
And so you know how quick that COVID-19 will affect an individual. And that's what I'm waiting on, Charlton, is for a collegiate or a professional player, Charlton, to end up in a hospital on a respirator. Hopefully they won't lose their lives. But I know that's going to be the end result to make people say, well, maybe we looked at this in the wrong capacity.
Yeah.
And maybe that will give the Negro athletes enough sense at that point to say they're not in this for us. We have the power, not the owners, and the players actually do. When you think about, there's been two strikes in NFL, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, when the Washington Redskins won the Super Bowl, that was the last strike that we had in the league, Charlton. I think they only played 9-10 games that year when they won the Super Bowl with Doug Williams in '86. But there was a strike earlier, Charlton, and who went on strike? It was the players. And when the players went on strike, Charlton, what happened? The league came to a halt.
They sure did.
Came to a halt. The owners did not have the ability to go out there and play. Yes, they brought in some scab players and brought those in because of the yearning for the game, Charlton.
Yeah.
But they weren't the star players. They didn't have the magnetism of the star players, Charlton, because they were the brand benchmark of the league. And this is why I'm so adamant about the players forming their own league.
Yeah.
Because now you won't have an owner saying that this is what we can do to you.
Yeah.
Now you control every percent, 100% of the narrative, from health to finances, Charlton. The Negroes right now have an opportunity to do this. and they must come together in unity and realistically look into the scenario.
Yeah, I remember when I was a young boy, there was a movie called The Birds. It was Alfred Hitchcock, and they were up on the north coast of California, and there were these birds that were all flying in, and they were attacking and hurting, killing people, Big C. And the premise of that movie, when people realized there were birds that was flying in and killing people, Big C, they were trying to leave, but they couldn't leave because the birds ultimately got to all of them. I analogize that to COVID-19. People know that there have been a lot of fatalities in COVID-19. And sadly, I heard a guy by the name of Rush Limbaugh that I interned at the same radio station he worked at back in the day. I believe he's dealing with cancer, going through all of his cancer treatment, and he's trying to tell dumb people that listen to him that COVID-19 is really not that menacing. 1% of the 99% that get injured, they're okay with it. And I doubt if he's ever going to stop his cancer treatments, as he's doing what POTUS is doing, telling people that COVID-19 is not real. Maybe he'll stop his cancer treatments, Big C, and put his money where his mouth is. But with the birds, it's one thing. But I want to tell you about another dirty bird. There's one down in Atlanta called the Dirty Birds. That's what they call the football team. But would you believe WNBA co-owner of the Atlanta Dream, she's a POTUS supporter. She supports Donald Trump, even though he grabs him by the P-U-S, blah, blah, blah. She still supported him. People do what they want to do in private. But she does not believe in the Black Lives Matter. And she's a co-owner of her team that's predominantly African-American. And she's telling this woman, shut up and dribble and quit talking about Black Lives Matter. And she wants a flag on the court along with Black Lives Matter. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, she was called to the plate by the WNBA Players Association today when they wrote a letter to the commissioner from all the African-American athletes asking the commissioner to expel her from the league,
Kathy
take
Engelbert.
the ownership away from her, and not to be able to participate in the WNBA any longer, Charlton. Because here are the players unanimously saying that they want to put Black Lives Matter on their uniform, as well as say her name in reference to Breonna Taylor, the EMT that was killed in her bed, shot 8 times by the police in St. Louis when they went to the wrong apartment, Charlton. And she's saying, no, they should not do that. They should only put the American flag on their uniform. She has no sensitivity towards Black lives or Black matters in the world, Charlton. She says she's a proponent of the Second Amendment right, but she says that blacks should not be able to carry guns while riding. Only white people should be able to carry guns in that situation because it makes it unsafe for white people, for blacks to have guns.
Wow.
So when you think about the racist, attitude that this individual has, and she's a member of Congress, and she was brought up on insider trading, but since she was a stumper for Trump, they let her slide with it, Charlton.
Yeah.
So this is the type of individual you deal with. She's in Congress and saying Black lives don't matter.
Yeah, how do you get convicted of insider trading? Someone has to drop the dime, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there was an investigation going on, but she was part of that investigation. And to get an individual that was in the Senate who was investigating Trump, and so they took him off the membership board that he was chairing, Charlton. And so they brought her along as an excuse. And they said, even though she sold the stocks, Charlton, there was part of the COVID-19 situation, knowing that they would lose a lot of money because of COVID-19, that she didn't have firsthand knowledge before selling their stock.
Yeah, it's amazing how they don't have firsthand knowledge, but their inside information. And again, it goes back to when you talked about what some people think, oh, that could never happen. Well, the Negro League already existed, so things can happen, just like the USFL happened and the XFL happened. People come together and they pool their money together and they can make things happen. But it's amazing how, talking about this again, how there's an owner, happen to be Caucasian, that is able to buy into ownership of a team and yet not respect the lives of the people that put money in her bank account because she sees them as shut up and dribble. And she says she doesn't want to see any more politics added to sports, but then she's a POTUS supporter. I think POTUS is part of politics. That makes sense to you, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, every time you turn around, Charlton, politics is raising its face in the sport. Politics needs sports to survive, Charlton. It's like a ventilator for politics. They know if they're ever slumping at any time, just make comments about a professional team that has a lot of Negroes on it, and you'll get a lot of attention.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I know they want to go down to IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Florida's one of the hardest hit states with COVID-19. And so the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, we'll see what happens. when she deals with the people who make her money, okay, not the co-owner, Kelly Loeffler, of the Atlanta program, the WNBA team. People can vote for who they want to vote for, but I will say that I am a little bit disheartened at times, not that I should be, but it's just an observation, as on every program that we have, Big C, we advocate for no room for domestic violence or assault or racism on our program. And I don't know what it is about women that if they were to send their daughter to a Girl Scouts meeting or to college, and there's a man that brags about grabbing them by the PUS, blah, 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 and they know this, how many women would feel comfortable that give him money and sending their own daughters over to his house, Big C, when he's already told you what they're going to do? Does that make sense to you? I don't understand that thinking, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, are you Republican or Democrat? That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, I think, well, it could be both, but I still don't understand women, irrespective of what their political affiliation is, when they have a daughter and that a man says what to do to them, and when it happens every 20 seconds in this country, and all they can do is to put more money in the men's pockets who talk that way. I want to talk about the NBA, and I'm listening to what you said about changing the name Washington Redskins, and people say, well, what's wrong with Redskins? But if you said, touchdown, Washington Rednecks, people would be offended. But the Redskins has lasted for too long. But I want to go to the NBA. NBA basketball commissioner Adam Silver, he's a good man in the eyes of most people, but he's starting to be a little bit concerned that COVID-19 plus a number of men who are starting to read about science and not just all about how big their ring is, Big C. The commissioner, he expressed concern the potential positive COVID-19 cases following quarantine inside of the league's campus will reveal in itself a hole in the bubble. He's not going to be in that bubble long term. He already knows the damages of it, just like the NFL knew about CTE. Right now, it's not about commissioners anymore. It's about men and looking at their grandparents and their parents and their siblings and children. And if they decide that they're going to throw caution to the wind and say, we don't care about science, we just want to go get a ring and chase a championship, and one of the owners of the WNBA says she doesn't give a darn about Black Lives Matter, she doesn't want to hear it anymore, and you still have guys that want to go play for these kind of people, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, you have to look at all the leagues, whether it's collegiate, whether it's professional. They've all said that black lives don't matter because black lives are a main financial cause, Charleston, and we need these black lives out there to play, to produce revenue for us. So as many Negroes as we can get to get on board and come out here and play, we're going to give you some money. We're going to give you some compensation that you can be proud of. But if your health at risk is what we're not concerned about, y'all. You got to understand the lung scarring that occurs once you get COVID-19, the lung capacity that you have after that. There are many other health conditions that are still going to come along with people, but that is the number one thing, Charlton, the lung scarring. When you think about having lung capacity, being able to breathe freely, this is the one thing that you lose once you get COVID-19. And being a professional athlete, that is the number one thing that you need is your endurance.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that said even if they come out of it, they survived it, they haven't been the same. So in a virtual interview with Fortune Brainstorm Health, Silver said the NBA expects, listen people, they're saying they're expecting more positive COVID-19 cases to pop up as teams arrive, not leave, but as teams arrive, they're expecting more cases to pop up at the NBA campus at Walt Disney World Resort down in Orlando. So at what point in time, as I said to you before, and everybody has their own thoughts, if you're a woman or a man and you're sending money to a man that says that he will assault your daughter because he's going to grab them by the PU, blah, 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 and people know what he said, and they send them anyway. What kind of person, if you're an athlete and you have the commissioner telling you what the doctor said, Dr. Fauci's right, as you get down in that bubble, you're going to test positive. They've already told you, like, enter at your own risk, and people are willing to do it anyway. That just befuddles me. It doesn't make any sense. Do you rationalize that, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is what I mean when you don't own your own product, Charlton, and you're at the dismay of someone else, Charlton. You're following their guidelines and what they're telling you. I think that every team that goes down into this bubble, that the owner should be required to follow down also. and be in that same facility, Charlton.
Yeah.
If that demand was put on by the Negro athletes,
by the owners,
league, I think that all of a sudden these owners would say, we don't have to play.
Big C, that would make so much sense. Several teams, including the Brooklyn Nets, Denver Nuggets, LA Clippers, Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, Sacramento Kings, they've closed their practice facilities in the past week due to COVID-19 cases among their respective travel groups. They haven't even gotten down to the bubble. They're getting this stuff without trading sweat and pathogens. And there's still people saying, well, I just want to win. I just want to win a trophy. I just want to win a ring. Are we that intellectually vapid that someone told us that a ring is more important than our lives or the people that we say we love? To me, you don't need anybody else to tell you outside of what your doctors told you. But unfortunately, we know there are people who, they go swimming in the water when it says beaches closed, shark sighting. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, maybe they'll put that ring in the coffin with a couple of them if they succumb to this disease.
Yeah, or someone that they love. It's all fair and love and war, but when people don't read, they're always going to have a problem. Major League Baseball, there's another player for the Oakland A's that tested positive for COVID-19. They didn't give out his name. There was 2 more players for the San Francisco Giants yesterday that tested positive for COVID-19. They did not give out their name, but Major League Baseball is more positive for coronavirus, Big C, that it may derail the season. And like I talked about the Alfred Hitchcock movie, the birds, and people were trying to leave the house, but the birds came in killing people anyway, kind of like the virus is. But I don't know, if people don't read, it's up to them to deal with it. Major League Baseball nears a 2 weeks countdown to the start of its delayed season. COVID-19 pandemic continues to keep players, including Boston Red Sox projected opening day starter Eduardo Rodriguez, off the field, Big C. It's just every single team it seems to go to, there's somebody that said they've already got it without the bubble. So outside of saying that the owners have to go to, what other last message would you give somebody if they're thinking about not trusting science and trusting their owners, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, I look at it from this aspect, Charlton. Only one team in each league can win a championship.
Yeah.
And when you think about every year, Charlton, every league has a draft, and it comes down to a lottery pick where they pull cards out of a bin or whatever, saying who falls in whatever selection.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to just take the top 10, top 8 teams, Charlton, in every league and put all those cards in a bin and spin it around and see who ends up with
yeah.
the championship.
Yeah.
Instead of putting human lives at stake.
Yeah, I think at some point in time, men got to start looking at their lives more important than what somebody says. The threat of an infection was enough for the Cleveland Indians, of all teams, Big C, to keep outfielder Franmil Reyes away from camp. He was told to stay home after he was seen on social media attending a weekend holiday party without wearing a mask. Are they going to play NBA basketball in the bubble with a mask? I doubt it. But you have people being seen on social media, or people who were seen at the POTUS rally at Mount Rushmore, Big C, that don't wear a mask. They're seeing hospitals are already filling up in Florida and Texas for people who don't want to wear a mask. 2 teams from last year's World Series champions, Washington Nationals and the Houston Astros, resumed workouts after canceling practices Monday because of testing delays. They're still trying to iron out the bugs. Astros manager Dusty Baker said no one's happy about it. The players, Major League Baseball, probably the testing site. But the test came back today and were able to work. Why in the world would Dusty Baker, who's probably on some type of blood pressure medication, be advocating to go sit inside of somebody's bubble, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, here's Dusty Baker in his 70s, at least mid-70s, Charlton, talking about going in and managing it. And this is one of the things we talked about. We talked about the elderly age of a couple of NBA coaches, D'Antonio and Popovich.
Yeah.
Look at Major League Baseball with the age of a lot of the managers in Major League Baseball, Charlton. There are several of them that are in their late 60s and 70s, Charlton. So when you're talking about putting these coaches out there in the dugout or on the base path, Charlton, you can't separate. And there's no way that you can play a basketball game or a football game with face covering on, Charlton. Many players tried playing with those protective shields. I know they came out before I got out of the game, and I tried putting one on. I could not breathe with that protective shield over my face.
Yeah.
And so try putting something directly over your nose and mouth, Charlton, and try to breathe and especially when football starts and the temperature inside of your helmet far exceeds 100 degrees.
Yeah, I guess every athlete is going to tell Dr. Fauci, you don't know what you're talking about. My owner says I can play, so it's all fair love and war. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the world on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. Major League Baseball, Big C, they're going to do what they have to do. So will the NFL, so will the NBA. But I want to turn to NASCAR before we close out today. There's a guy by the name of Jimmie Johnson, and if you think about it, the COVID-19 pandemic, it halted racing for 10 weeks. Spectators largely been banned from the racetracks. But think about what happened. Johnson, his streak of 663 consecutive starts, most among active NASCAR drivers, it came to an end Sunday when he missed the Brickyard 400 in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he won't be cleared to race until he tests negative twice in a 24-hour span. Now, Johnson is expected to be retested this week in an effort to get back into the number 48 Chevrolet in Sunday's race at Kentucky Speedway, but that's another person that was not allowed to participate because he tested positive, and it cost him a winning streak, a streak that stopped at 663. I'm sure he wanted to get up to 700. But you know what made him sit down, Big C? COVID-19 and science, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you also think about that, Charlton. Here's a NASCAR driver. You talk about social distancing and separation. You're not, cheek to cheek when you're in a race car.
Yeah.
You're separated by a huge amount of steel and rubber, Charlton, going around that track. But, the peril that you put other drivers in when you're there in pit row and the pit crew, NASCAR is being a vanguard in this issue, saying that anybody tests positive, you're not going to be able to participate.
Yep.
I just wish that the Negroes in the NBA and the NFL did the same thing.
Yeah, they can get rid of the swastikas, they can get rid of Confederate flags and even the noose. But if you can't read, then you don't even know they got rid of those things. And I mean that a lot of guys really, you just got to trust your doctor. You can't even play the game unless you pass a physical. Last story I want to touch on, Big C. Our show ends way too fast. I wish thoughts and prayers. University of Alabama offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian recovering from heart surgery. I know he had been around the country at different schools. He was also at University of Southern California for a time, also University of Washington head coach. He's recuperating at home down in Tuscaloosa, expected to make a full recovery. But would you believe that while he was recovering, the doctors advised him not to get out and be around strenuous activity? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not to get out and be around strenuous activities. So having heart surgery, that means you have a pre-existing condition and a weakened immune system, Charlton. So how are you going to be able to go back and coach at the collegiate level, Charlton, when we see the spiking of COVID rise in the state of Alabama, and we know that they had to shut down the construction of their stadium because of the number of people who had tested positive.
Yeah, they tested positive. But I just want all athletes to know that Coach Sarkisian, he decided to listen to his doctor. I'm sure he didn't tell his doctor after he had the heart surgery, no, man, I got to get out and coach. You have no idea. I got to get out and coach. And if you don't let me get out and coach, what am I going to do? The players miss me, my fans miss me, and all that jazz. It's all fair and love and war. I really do appreciate the way things are growing. And I do know as we close out the next minute or so, Big C, the NFL made about $15 billion in 2019. African-American players collectively, about 80% of the league, accounted for about $10.5 billion, which is a lot more than the $500 million that Patrick Mahomes is going to get over the next 10 years or 12 years. They got that last year, 1 year. If you did own your own league, collectively you control about $10.5 billion. That means you would have to think like Dana White, who owns the UFC, and I think that's about a $4 billion for him. He could have decided he was going to promote for other people, but he decided to do it for himself, and now he has a lot of money in the bank, and he doesn't have to wait. In fact, he'll send other players to get out there and fight with COVID-19. He makes money whether they test negative or positive. Is there anything that the African American Football League, or you call the Negro Football League, can learn from him in the last minute? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Johnson, you mentioned it all. You said a mouthful when you said that, is that you control your economic wealth. You control generational wealth, Johnson. You control what happens with you and your life and the rest of the Negroes that are playing in the league.
Yeah, they can all play. You just got to read about it. And I'm telling you, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Bodini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, there's a lot that white politicians could learn from when you constantly talk about reparations. You think about Pittsburgh Steelers running back James Conner, who did in the past couple of months, he has bought his dad a pickup, something that he always wanted to have. He turned around a couple of weeks later and he bought his mother a brand new house. This is what you have when you have financial means, Charlton, to be able to help support your family and create generational wealth. And this is what I'm talking about. If the Negroes want to form their own league, these will become commonalities in the African-American community, Charlton. So these are the things that I look at in what's coming up in sports. And I also, once again, want to thank the first responders, the nurses, doctors, and paramedics who are out there on the front line helping Americans every day.
Yep, they're doing their job every day. Collectively, $10.5 billion. You can have it every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. Follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.